Hello, hello, interweb family. Just gonna wait a couple moments here for Mandy to join me for our live. Forgive me if it's not the most graceful start here, because I have not done this before. So I see one. Mandy, if that's you, I believe you can ask me to join and then I can approve it. Or, let's see here. Okay, perfect. I see that it's you. I think I can add you. Let's see if this works. Beautiful. Success.
Beautiful. Yay, we're both here. We did it. Hi, everyone. We are so excited to be here with all of you. So first, I'm going to go over a little bit about the flow today and then set some intentions. And then Emily's going to lead us through a short embodiment practice so we can all just kind of land here together. I have my notes here to share the flow. Also, Emily, did you want to drop the graphic you made in the comments?
And you know what? Well? I'm looking right now and I don't know if it will let me from the phone. So we may not be able to drop that schedule yet. There is one on our original post if anyone wants to see that. I did post a flow earlier today of just what we're generally going to be covering, and then we'll post a graphic at the end as well for anyone who may be coming into our world new with this video. Welcome, and we'll just post like how you can find us.
Perfect. I have an echo happening. So I have, can you say something else, friend?
How is that?
Oh, not good. I can hear us talking and then I can hear us again. I don't know.
Hold on. I'm going to unplug and try to replug in. Let's see. Is it any better without my headphones in? Can you hear me, friend?
I can hear you. Hold on. Oh no, it's still there, friend. I think we might need to restart it.
Do you want to, I'm gonna click you off and re-invite you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's see. Everyone set a good intention that we're able to get Mandy on with good sound. Let's see here. Thank you everybody for hanging tight with us. All right. Okay, let's see.
Okay, let's see.
Any better this time?
See if it's better now. I think so. I think it's fixed.
Our first tech hiccup.
Okay, tech gods. Okay, tech gods, be with us. All right, so I'm going to start by letting you guys know the flow of today, and then I'll set some intentions, and Emily's going to lead us through a little bit of embodiment practice breath work. So after that, we're going to go over who Teal Swan is. For anyone that's not a Teal Swan follower, we're just going to cover the basics of who Teal Swan is and the deep end and what the deep end is. Then we're going to go over what is the completion process. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our personal journeys. So what drew us to Teal's work originally, how many of Teal's events we've been to, and what our experience was like, how the completion process has personally changed and affected our lives, and then how we felt watching the deep end and what we want people to know about it. And then at the end, we'll just share our contact info and close the container. So that's kind of the flow for today. And other than that, we're going to just allow ourselves to speak whatever's going to come through. We have no plan other than that. So completely unedited. And I just want to start by saying first that Emily and I both, we met before the call, and we're both feeling a bit nervous just because this is such a charged topic. And being two sensitives, we can feel the charge around it, and it's a bit scary to talk about. So that's kind of why we want to set these intentions and really create a safe container for us and for everyone watching today. So with that, I just want to ask everyone to close your eyes with us and really land here with us today. And I just want to set an intention that my higher self drop in today, drop into my lower body, and along with Emily, feeling the presence of both of our spirit teams. And feeling a bubble of protection around each of us and around this container, allowing us to speak our truth today and speak honestly and vulnerably about our own journeys. Feeling that bubble of protection around each of you as well. You're safe to receive this information. And with that, Emily, I would love to give the floor to you for our embodiment practice.
Thank you for those lovely intentions, friend. So I'm going to invite everyone as well to just adjust if you need to. Just take a couple moments to settle, get comfortable, find a spot where your body can relax for a few moments and you're not going to be distracted by the environment. And I really want to just invite everyone to bring your focus here to this call, whether you're with us live or you're watching this on a potential replay in the future. I find that there's a real magic that happens when we can drop into the present moment and connect with each other in that energy. So setting aside anything prior from the day, anything upcoming. I know we have beautiful friends in so many time zones now, wherever you're at in the world. Just bringing your heart and your energy and your focus here. And if you haven't already, I want to invite you to close your eyes and just start noticing your breath. No need to shift or change anything. Just starting to notice the flow of the breath, the quality. Is it shallow? Is it deep? Starting to notice where expansion happens on the inhale. And setting the conscious intention to relax with each exhale. And you may see, feel, or sense grounding cord or your energy dropping down to the center of Mother Earth. Going down, 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 dropping through the layers of building, soil, whatever is between you and the earth. And as that energy connects with the center, you're met with this radiant light and the presence and the energy of unconditional love. And each time you inhale, that frequency and that light is being drawn up through that grounding cord. moving closer and closer. You may even start to feel a warmth or a buzzing. And as that energy comes closer and closer and starts to enter your body, it's filling your heart. And with each inhale, your heart center is becoming brighter and brighter and brighter with this light of unconditional love, until your heart is like this brilliant, radiating star. And I want you to see and feel that light spreading throughout your entire body, extending beyond your body into your energy field, and extending beyond that to connect with everyone else in this container. Just taking a moment to energetically acknowledge the community that we're connecting here with, to meet each other at the heart center in this energy of unconditional love. And from this space, I would love for each of us to set the intention that we each receive individually and collectively the medicine of whatever it is that we need from this exchange, from this call, from this time together. Just taking a moment to feel that energy circulating between us all. And then as you're ready, I want you to slowly start noticing the temperature of the room, any sounds that may be going on around you. You might notice the texture of your clothes or the sensation of where you're sitting or laying down. And I'm going to count you back from 10 slowly. And on 1, gently, when and if you're ready, opening your eyes, and we'll bring our attention back to this live together. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Gently opening your eyes. Welcome back.
Beautiful, friend.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'd like to pass our mic back to Mandy for a moment here. We're going to do some brief introductions and just give you guys a little bit of an idea of like who we are, what we do beyond just being certified completion process practitioners. In case you're new coming into my world, I have a feeling many of you will probably know us, if not have worked with us. But just for the case that this is, you know, maybe reaching a wider audience, just so you guys can have a chance to sort of connect with who we are and where we're coming from in this.
Perfect. So my name is Mandy, Mandy J, and I'm a certified completion process practitioner, and I specialize in conscious parenting. and I'm highly knowledgeable in gentle parenting and respectful parenting. And my process is using emotional alchemy, one of those modalities being the completion process, blended with the how-tos of gentle parenting, which just creates such magic for my clients, because I tend to either attract clients from, you know, the emotional alchemy world, and they're missing these pieces of like the how-tos, and like they just blend together so beautifully, or I bring in clients that are from the gentle parenting world, and then I'm bringing in the emotional alchemy. And it just creates such magic within the system as we implement these how-tos with our children from an embodied place. So we're trying to parent differently than we were parented, and we can't do that when our nervous system, we're fighting our own nervous system. So that's where the emotional alchemy comes in. And yeah, it's just been a beautiful journey of my own alchemy and how that has affected my relationship with my daughter, and then bringing that embodiment to my clients.
I'm fortunate enough to not just call Mandy colleague, but also she's my best friend, and I like to call her the vulnerability ninja. Thank you, friend. Your work is deeply impactful in this world.
Thank you, friend.
I love you too. So I am Emily Simpson, if you don't know me. I primarily work with clients who are struggling with health in some capacity. I have a particular interest in chronic conditions, autoimmune conditions, things that have been deemed terminal by the conventional world. And basically what I like to work with people doing is dismantling this concept of disease and the paradigm that something has gone wrong in the body, and to start being able to follow the symptomology of the body and be able to actually see it for what it is, which is something has gone right, and your body is responding appropriately to the environments, both externally and internally. And when we see that, and we can dissolve this idea that it's me against my body, me against my symptomology, we become open to like, why is this actually happening beyond this paradigm of I'm broken and we need to fix that. And we move more into the paradigm of how do I cultivate a life that supports wellness, supports thriving, not just for the sake of surviving something, but for actually living. And I bring a blend of different modalities from alternative trainings. I went through the worlds of sort of conventional medicine before dropping that, herbalism, and also I'm a certified completion process practitioner. And my love and my connection in this work is very, very similar to Mandy in that when you are healing, it is infinitely harder when we are fighting our own nervous system, because the chemistry that we create internally is so incredibly powerful and is largely determined by the state of our nervous system. So this work has been really deeply impactful in my life and also with clients. So that's sort of the the connection of worlds here for me, of this somatic emotional work with the health paradigm.
Beautifully said, friend. And I just want to add too that part of my journey on this planet, part of my biggest karma on this planet is transmuting and healing binge eating. So I was trapped in the diet binge cycle for 10 years, and Emily has been a huge part of my journey in repatterning these really, really deep layers around food and around exercise. So I want to personally thank you, friend, for your work and just for the way it has personally impacted me. So much has shifted by being in your field and being your friend. And
Thank
I'm
you,
so
woman. All right.
Yeah. So with that, shall we just
let's
jump
dive
right
in? We'll go
Let me clear my throat chakra. I keep
straight in here. I'm just going to give you guys kind of an overview in case you're new to the world of completion process, this modality of somatic processing, to Teal's work, to the deep end, just so you have kind of an idea of what we're touching on here if you haven't seen that before. And then I'm going to pass the mic back to Mandy, and she's going to tell you a little bit about completion process specifically. So if you're new to Teal's world, and I struggle to sum up any human being in one explanation, but I will say my perception of this, at least, is that she's a spiritual teacher who really teaches to reality, how to be in reality, how to honor what is actually happening in your nervous system and be authentic in that and cultivate real safe relationships with other humans. If you don't know her backstory, she went through years of ritualistic abuse and, survived things that many humans on this planet cannot even imagine the depth of suffering for. And out of that created this incredible process to help people heal and to help people live better lives with whatever they're struggling with, not just relationships. I would say healing trauma in general and really being able to widen the lens of trauma. And I think we're starting to see this more now, at least, in the worlds that Mandy and I are interacting with regularly, of switching this perception of trauma from like the big things, quote, that people hear about, more to, I'll give you the Teal's definition of trauma, which is basically anything without resolution. Anything, thank you, friend. Distress without resolution. And how that affects the consciousness. So that's really what this process specifically works with and speaks to. And as far as the deep end was a docuseries. It was meant to be a documentary on Teal's work, on her life, on just everything about this work. And I won't go too deeply. I don't want to give it a ton of attention, but suffice it to say, it was not made in a neutral tone. It was made in a bias towards the negative. So I will say, I'll leave that to everyone to watch and, come to your own perceptions about that. But what I would say is I invite you to just think really critically about the messages that are being communicated and, through music, through splicing things together, through the way that things were chopped and edited. And you'll hear a little bit more about that through Mandy and I sharing our experiences and whatnot. But it basically was a piece made on Teal and this work, essentially. And please feel free, friend, if there's anything you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, I do want to share a little bit about just Teal's perception and like what she's been sharing online, just for those that don't follow Teal. She has been very transparent about this and has made several videos about the documentary and her perception of how they splice things up. And I really want to invite everyone to, if you're going to watch the documentary, also watch those videos and just run everything through your own emotional guidance system. My wish for everyone would be that it be a process of coming back to your own truth and connecting with your own emotional body rather than taking anyone's word as ultimate truth. Said. because the goal here is sovereignty. The goal is to come back to you, to come home to you. So
Beautifully said.
Yeah. And that's kind of why Emily and I's intention is to just share. We talked a lot about this, you know, and we're not going to go into today picking apart Teal, her community, giving our perception of whether or not Teal's good or bad. It is a waste of time and our energy. What we will share is what we can speak to the truth of, which is our experience. And let that be a piece of the puzzle for you to feel through your experience of all of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And as long as there's nothing else you want to add, friend, I'll go into the completion process a little bit. Is there anything
I
else
was
you want
going
to add
to, but I think it's going to be touched on other places. So to
okay.
to save all of our time, I would love to turn it over to you to tell about the completion process.
Perfect. So I feel like every time I describe the completion process to someone, it like comes out differently. And that was my intention today. I'm like, I'm not going to read from a script. I'm just going to feel into my heart and let my heart describe the completion process to you. So the completion process is a healing modality by which we access and sit with a present day trigger. And, you know, as a practitioner, what we do is we create the safe space and the guidance to explore that emotion in the body. And what that does is it opens up the nervous system to present the emotion to us and then present the first time that that emotion, that experience happened. And from there, once a memory is accessed, we go in and re-experience the memory from the child self's perspective. And what this does is it really enables us to see and feel our own experience, which has been suppressed and pushed down in the nervous system, which is a super important part of the healing process. Once that has been completed, it's a process of inviting in our adult self, inviting in support figures. It can be people from our real life. It can be archetypes, etheric teams, divine parents, any energy our child self needs. And it's a process of coming into that memory and meeting the unmet needs of the child. And what that does is it creates permanent emotional resolution in the system. And it's a way of resolving inner battles within ourselves. Most inner battles within ourselves are a child aspect and a parent aspect. And we interact internally in these ways all day long, and we don't even realize it until we go in and do this healing work and this alchemy. And it's so powerful. It's like we don't even realize how we're living a life from our trauma until that's alchemized within us. And it's like living a life from a new childhood, from a nervous system that hasn't been traumatized. And I'm hoping that everyone watching can just feel into the power of that.
If I may, I would love to add one thing just more from the health practitioner mindset here, which Teal also explains, I believe, in the completion process book. There is a book, if anyone is curious about that, detailing the steps of the process, all of the beautiful reasons why in depth. But I'll just share it here as well, is that humans and really all beings were meant to go through a physiological process when we experience trauma to be able to release and discharge that from our body. And as humans, because we adapt socially, oftentimes that natural process for allowing the trauma cycle to complete gets disrupted. And then, we start seeing all manner of different things. I don't want to go into like diagnosis land here. But I think we can all have an understanding of what that may look like. And when we move through the completion process, it allows the somatic work of this, as Mandy was explaining, allows the nervous system to open back up. And in the presence of a safe practitioner that can accurately mirror back to you, validate for you, and help guide you through this process and really just being with it. So many of us, like the trauma in and of itself was that we just couldn't feel what we were actually feeling, either because we weren't allowed to, there was punishment of some kind, there was just emotional neglect, there was no one with us in it. But by opening that up and allowing the body to actually feel and move through that emotion, it allows the trauma cycle to complete. And from the health standpoint, it has incredible effects on the nervous system, in the brain, just like the rewiring that happens from that. And just my personal experience is it sets you free of that in a very lasting, sustainable, palpable way, because it goes beyond just mentally understanding what happened and why and rationalizing it, and into actually allowing your body to complete emotionally what it would have had you had a safe environment and safe people in your life for that to express.
Yes, friend. And just to add to what you just said, it takes the aspects of us that dissociated out of the body in the moment and brings them back down into the body. So like, as humans, we're accustomed to like thinking all day, thinking about paying the bills, thinking about our partner, obsessing about how they feel. All of these patterns of being dissociated because we haven't been safe in our bodies or in relationships. So this brings us back into our body, and we're like literally not thinking and strategizing.
Exactly. Also, one more thing I do want to throw out here as well, just for sake of like giving everyone as many resources and tools as possible as well here, is I will say, at least for me, the completion process in the context that Teal explains it, obviously I got trained through her modality of work, is by far the most extensive, most detailed, most beneficial version of this that I have seen. That said, I do want to just mention for some people, because I think that there has been a perception that this is a process that it's like she's the only one who's ever practiced it. And I will say I do think it is the most refined version that I have been able to find. But this is very similar to some other inner child work as well. So I just feel like that may be worth noting to explore, because of just the way that I've seen it painted, like through the deep end specifically, as if it's specific to this community, this work, and it's not. So I would also encourage everyone in the pursuit of personal truth and personal sovereignty to go look, go discover. Like, this is, by no means the only tool or necessarily what I would believe to be like the end all be all tool. And it is a highly effective tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Teal speaks into these modalities too. Somatic experiencing, breath work, uses different versions of these other modalities as well. So yeah, I agree, friend. It's like there's this attack on Teal. Teal is dangerous, and therefore her process is dangerous. And it's like, wait a minute, this process is already out there in different forms. So like, why is Teal dangerous, kind of thing? Yeah. So I love that you added that, friend. And I kind of wanted to circle back around and share. I'm just feeling called to share when you're talking about like being allowed to move through trauma, this experience with Harper came up, and I want to share just from a parenting standpoint, like how the work can affect how we show up. So one time I was doing some work downstairs and Harper was upstairs with her babysitter, and the baby gate that we had at the top of the stairs failed and she fell down the stairs. And, you know, feeling back into older versions of myself, first thing I probably would have done was blamed and gotten mad at. I'm sure I would have tried to suppress that in some way, but still gotten angry with the babysitter. You know, what happened? Oh my God, in my own state of total dysregulation and freak out. Meanwhile, my child is over here totally left by herself to process it alone, which children can't do. They cannot process something unless a regulated adult is with them, mirroring and helping them process it. So because of this healing, I mean, I am so freaking proud of myself in the way I showed up in that moment. It was like, it was like, I went into just straight up mama bear, like, it's go time. This is what we trained for moment. And I just went to her and I was like, you know, I was immediately attuning to her, and she like had this look of shock on her face, and she's like starting to cry, and she's like, what happened? And I just said, you fell down the stairs. I'm right here. You know, and I just like gently picked her up and put her in my lap. And, you know, it was a process of allowing her to feel through and like mirroring. You know, I'm like, you know, you're shaking a little bit. That makes sense. That was really scary. That was really, really scary. And, you know, she wanted to ask, like, what happened several times. And I just mirrored, you fell down the stairs, the baby gate fell, and then you fell, and right here, you know, and then my babysitter was like in a state of dysregulation. And I like very lovingly was like, you know, we'll be up in a moment. I'm just going to be with Harper right now. And she was able to receive that. And so it's like all these energies, and I was able to contain it, have loving direction, be with Harper, allow her body to process what happened. And I swear to you, like, she wasn't even scared of the stairs after that. She was up and down the stairs, no problem, the next day. And I was just like blown away. So just wanted to share that as like a real life example of what a child needs in a moment of trauma, and like the way that this work can help a parent show up in the way their child needs.
Beautiful, friend. It gives you capacity back, because you move from living in a state of chronic, for most of us, dysregulation and reactionary responses to whatever is happening in the moment. And especially moments like this, you know, thank goodness it wasn't more serious. But even in a moment, you know, that is like a low level crisis kind of moment, is when we are most vulnerable to be triggered into those patterns. And doing this work, I think we can both say, has really given us capacity to respond and be able to consciously create and consciously guide the experiences that are unfolding in our life, rather than just being stuck in reactionary dysregulation. And to your share inspired me a little bit, actually, to put in here for the people who may be watching this from my world, wondering like, well, how is this relevant in the context of health? And the piece that I always talk to people about, and why I say start with the nervous system work before any of the other stuff, is because healing, a physical journey of healing, is inherently dysregulating. And the reason being, simply, if what you were doing right now was working, you would be healed. So therefore, in order to heal truly, we have to make changes that are going to break us out of our regular routines, our regular comfort zones, our regular dietary habits, relationships, environments. And that process for most people is very dysregulating. To make change in general, and particularly if you're someone who is in a really, really critical state and you need to make a lot of changes fast, because your body is just demanding that now. Doing the nervous system work is what allows you the capacity to be able to move through that process without it completely collapsing you. Because I see so many pieces in the world of, or so many people in the world of health and healing, and they have like the how-to pieces. They, you know, oftentimes are even aligned in like what to practically implement, but they don't have the nervous system capacity to withstand the change and what's going to happen in their body and their being through that. And this work really gives you that, in my experience.
Beautifully said, friend.
Yes.
I'm looking at our notes here.
Where should we go next?
Do you
I
feel
do.
complete
That
on
feels
that?
complete to me.
Okay. Yeah, so the next question, and if it feels good to you, friend, I'll let
Sure.
you go first on this one. What drew you to Teal's work? So a little bit about how you found Teal. And
Yes.
Excuse the noise outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's a
I think it may
trailer
have come
rattling
through a bit, but it's not loud or disruptive from my end. Yeah, so for me, when I found Teal, I was sort of on the tail end of my like physical healing journey at its worst. And to give everyone just sort of a context of what that looked like, I was fighting multiple terminal diagnoses. I was estranged from my family, from my friends. Like I basically had one person in my life that I was like interacting with on a regular basis. And even that relationship was quite toxic in many ways. I had been raised in a family rife with dysfunction and abuse happening. I was, at the time, not even completely aware. I was still working through layers. I actually have a bit of a cult background as well, not in the same context and magnitude that Teal does, if you're familiar with her story. But I had gotten out of that just a few years earlier and was really having trouble reconciling the reality of what I had been through, what had happened with people in that experience and everything. And I was really in a state of, quite honestly, just feeling broken. My life at that time felt like just surviving. Every single day was surviving in a literal physical sense, in an emotional sense. Just like years of suppressed trauma, no capacity, no even like awareness of what healthy relationships could look like. And not just in the context of like romantically, I mean like friendships, parental relationships, anything. Just very, very lost and sort of raw. Like I really think of this time as like, it was sort of the stripping away of everything and coming into reality about what my life had been, things that had happened, and where I was at. And I found Teal's videos just popped up on the algorithm on YouTube, and I started watching, and it was just so resonant to where I was at the time. I was going through a horrendous breakup in that moment, and I think it was one on relationships that I watched first. And it was just so insightful. And at that point in my life, it was kind of like the buoy that got me through. It was like witnessing her work and her story was like, there's hope. Like it was this ray of light in the darkness of like, I have no idea how I'm going to unpack and deal with all of this. But there are other people out there that are doing it. And if they can do it, then maybe I can do it. So it was like the window of hope, sort of.
I have tingles,
Yes.
friend, as you say that.
that's how it started for me. And then I was just sort of watching the weekly Ask Teal series, diving into that and whatnot. And I was leaving the living situation that I was in at the time and had no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do, had no plan. I had basically removed myself from normal life and society for 2 or 3 years at that point to really just be in nature and heal. And there was this like, oh my God, how the heck am I gonna do this on any level? Like, go back to working, go back to trying to have relationships with people. And very shortly after I moved into a new living situation, I got 3 roommates. And my thought at the time was just, I want to do this differently. I want life to be different. I want to know what good relationships can feel like. And so I had saved up a little bit of money through my health crisis, and I paid to go to the training to get certified as a completion process practitioner. And that was when things just like radically started changing from surviving life to starting to heal, starting to be able to maintain, and then life starting to actually improve along the way. So that was my introduction to the work.
So powerful, friend. And really speaks to how necessary the work is if you're going to heal on a physical level.
Absolutely. And I will say, for anyone watching from that context, that was a huge draw for me. It just, in my personal journey at the time, and I'm sure as anyone who has experienced, severe illness to any degree can attest, it's like bad days aren't just bad days, they're horrific days. Because when your system is already depleted, already taxed, stress has a massive effect. And I was really, really interested in this work as well, because I knew I was having so many challenges in relationship that the stress of that was heavily impacting my health. And there was just this, for me at the time, a knowing of like, if I don't resolve some of the underlying emotional turmoil and trauma and find a way to be able to connect with other humans that feels good, it's like I'm never going to make it out of this health thing, because it was just trigger after trigger after trigger all the time. So that, as I mentioned before, it's like this work really gave me the capacity to open back up and engage with life again. Which in turn very much improved my physical state.
Yes. Thank you for sharing, friend. It's an honor to witness you expressing your journey anytime.
And I would love for you to share your intro to this as well.
Oh, okay. So when I found Teal, I was already in the growth kind of world. A self-proclaimed self-help book junkie, if you will. And like still holding shame around that. So like, I had to hide my book collection when people came over. And so I had been kind of, what I would have called at the time healing for about 10 years. And it started when I lost and gained a large amount of weight 3 times. And the third time I gained it back, it was 60 pounds. And I gained it all back in 1 year. And that was my complete rock bottom. I mean, I went to a really dark emotional place. and just felt epic levels of powerlessness. And that's when I came across a woman named Janine Roth. And she writes books about emotional eating, binge eating. And it really opened my world up to going inside instead of fixing the outside. And so for a long time, I was following her and like all these other healing, self-help growth mindset type things. And so I had worked on that, experienced a ton of shift and a ton of relief. And then I had kind of this awakening around relationships and realized I was attracting narcissistic partners, and was studying attachment styles and was kind of shifting around that. And then I experienced change around that, and attracted at the time a really aligned partner. And we had our daughter. And what led to finding Teal was that we lost my partner's home in the Camp Fire in Northern California in 2018. And my experience of that was unlike many of the other people that experienced it because of the work I'd done on myself. I really was like blown away at how I was able to emotionally move through that experience during it and after. And like hearing how other people experienced it was really just like, wow, the work I've done on myself really has changed how I experience life, like at a fundamental level. And I was like, okay, what is this experience teaching me? And immediately got the soul answer of like, it's time for me to start helping other people and move from this, like, we never stop being students, but move more into a teacher and guide kind of role. And from that point, I started like my coaching business, and I was exploring like what modalities I wanted to either get certified in or practice. And I was searching online, and I came across Teal's videos. And, on a soul level, I've always been a truth seeker. And so when I found Teal, her videos just completely resonated with me. There was no resistance to receiving her information. Everything that she was saying felt like truth, and just like all these things I'd learned just kind of clicked together. It was like click, 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 click. I experienced like massive integration super quickly just by watching her videos, because like parts of me that knew these things and parts of me that knew these things just like all clicked in. And I love telling this part of the story. So I found her videos, and then I was researching the modalities, and I was like, one thing I hated about being a coach was selling myself. It's like, I'm Mandy, and I'm really good, and you should come, work with me because I'm awesome. It just felt like so gross to me and just inauthentic. And so I asked the universe, I was like, okay, show me how to sell myself without selling myself. And at the time, it just felt impossible. I was like, I don't know how you're going to bring that in, but please do it. And I came across Teal's video about the completion process, like within a week that I set that intention. And it was like an instant soul knowing that I was supposed to be facilitating this process. And I immediately applied, and within 3 months was at CP training. And through beginning to do the process with myself, it was like, I can sell the process. I don't have to sell myself. And through my own healing now, selling myself along with the process has become easier, and it has felt more aligned to be like, yeah, this process is amazing, and here's what I bring to it, which is awesome. So, yeah, so I think that feels complete for how I found Teal. And yeah, I feel like what I'm wanting to move into, we'll touch more in on later, but.
Beautiful, friend. And I always love hearing the story of your awakening and the hiding of your self-help books. And the reason I say that, and I just like, it really resonates for me as well. I guess the piece that I want to add to this is I think for both of us, this work took things beyond that mental understanding. Because from what I've heard of your journey, and I know to be true in mine, was like prior to Teal's work, I was very much seeking. And for me, I was someone who was fortunate enough to be raised in a really open family. My parents were two different religions. They didn't really raise me as any particular type of faith. I was raised with an aunt that was a life coach. Like, so I was exposed to a lot of different belief systems, a lot of different like self-help work, energy work, inner child work, like all kinds of different stuff. So growing up as a child and a teen, I was fascinated and I got into these things. And to be honest, I think that was some of the misery, was because I was mentally processing so much, but I wasn't somatically processing anything. And I think we both had that experience of when we found Teal's work, there was just this like, whoa, something is really different here. This isn't just another idea. It's not just another mental construct.
Yes. And being that we're both sensitives too, and like, I don't know about you, but for me, when I heard this concept that like every emotion in your body is valid, I was like, it is? No way. Like, this is awesome. How do we move forward with that information? Oh, yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I'll just share one other thing real quick too. During this time when I was like pre-Teal but in the growth work, I was a flight attendant and I was working a lot of red eyes. So I would literally like read my books and journal in the jump seat at night while everyone's sleeping, and like sometimes process emotionally, but I didn't like realize what I was doing. And I remember this really profound moment where I connected with my inner child for the first time, and I just wept in my jump seat. Like the plane is pitch black, everyone's asleep, and I'm just sitting up front going, just crying in my jump seat. And I remember feeling this profound relief. And so when I found Teal's work, it was like, oh my God, that's what I did in my jump seat. And like, I didn't even know it. So it was like, except, you know, Teal's process is so much more intricate. And like, what I love about completion process is it doesn't skip a nuance of a feeling. It does not skip one fragment of self. It is so thorough. And like, I've facilitated with people in the emotional alchemy world. And when I facilitated for them, they've been like, wow, I've never gone that deep, or I wouldn't have realized this aspect of self if you hadn't asked this one question. And yeah, so even people that aren't in Teal's world, I'm constantly getting reflections of how in-depth and thorough Teal's process is.
Yes.
It's so magical. Yeah,
I absolutely agree with that piece. Just the detailing and the speaking to, it's like layers between layers is what comes to mind. Because in the, you know, the conventional world, I feel like we only really talk about the big emotions. There's like anger, grief, happiness. You might get into guilt, maybe shame, some people, and really starting to get into these finer nuances of like the layers of resistance between emotion, the layers of shock. And I think for a lot of people, when they think emotion or they think emotional release, and certainly for me, when I was new to this work, there was this perception that it looks a certain way. And for me, that perception was like that it looked like lots of crying or raging and screaming. And certainly there are processes like that. And, you know, there's a beauty and a time for that to express out. What I didn't realize was that there were also these subtle, finer layers. And the one that always comes to mind is shock, because on the surface, it almost looks like no emotion whatsoever. And yet there is so much there. And, you know, working with practitioners who can sit with you in those nuances and give presence and space to those places that most people have never had presence and space for is just magical.
Mm-hmm.
Magical.
Yeah. Yes. And so much can release, you know, and the more I've worked with these super fine layers in myself, the more I can see and feel them with a client and be like, yeah, let's sit with that a little longer. Like, let that expand a little bit. And sometimes you'll feel just like, or you'll see just like a slight shift in body movement. You'll feel a release. And it can be really subtle, but really, really powerful. You know, or a yawn or a sigh, or, you know, those are forms of release when we give presence to these really nuanced
Yes, absolutely.
layers. You've facilitated some pretty epic sessions for me with layers like that.
And likewise, yes. Oh, for anyone.
Oh, okay. Why is someone knocking on my door right now? I think it's Amazon. We'll just ignore that.
I have to give Mandy a shout out here, and maybe we'll touch on this more I think, with some of the other questions. But I will say, in the beginning of our friendship, Mandy's the first friend I had that it was like, we went into friendship both intentionally, consciously wanting to create safety in a relationship, to create authenticity, and like to really just practice vulnerability to like the fullest extent that we could with another human being. And at the time, my capacity for that was none whatsoever. Like, I remember our first couple connection calls as friends.
This is me hugging that version of you.
Was literally like me sitting with Mandy and she held space for these layers of like, I'm just uncomfortable to even be here kind of stuff. And thank goodness.
A joy and an honor to sit with you in all of it, friend. And I want to speak to my end of that too a little bit. And what's been super healing about being your friend from my end is, you know, I've always been someone with really big feelings, big emotions, and always attracting humans that don't have the capacity to hold that. And then, of course, as I've built my own capacity to hold myself in that, I've attracted now Emily and other friends. Shout out to Laura, our other friend. And, oh, I remember the first time Emily set a boundary with me around needing to miss a call. And I had these feelings come up because I had serious trauma around cancellations and then having no space to have feelings about the cancellation. And so it was terrifying to share, you know, while I loved her no, and I was so grateful that she was sharing her no, because ultimately I don't want people in my life to abandon themselves because that creates resentment. There was still these feelings. And I was like, okay, the universe is challenging me to share my feelings. And I just shared really vulnerably, you know, what I just said with Emily. And she just held me in so much love in that and really saw me. And she did not abandon her boundary because my feelings were there. And oh yeah, there's my Amazon notification. And she made space for my feelings. I cannot even tell you how incredibly healing that was for someone to go, I so hear you. obviously I still can't make the call, but your feelings are so important to me. And now that, you know, you also said, like, now that I know this thing about reliability, I will put more effort into being reliable when I can. And if there's more you need to express and move through, I want to hear every little piece of it. And this is something she continuously tells me. And every time I hear it, it's so fucking healing. Excuse my French. And I'm just so grateful, friend, for your friendship and your companionship and the safety we've created in our friendship. And it just feels like a complete rewiring of my nervous system. And I just am consistently in awe that we get to experience this in this lifetime. It's
Same.
fucking everything.
And likewise, actually, I would love to share a little bit as well. I remember that experience so vividly. And the healing for me in it was that you honored my no at the same time as expressing your feelings. And it was like Mandy shared this so beautifully and so lovingly. I wish I could find the text and just read it, because it was such a beautiful blending of, like, I felt absolutely seen and heard. There was no shaming. There was no guilting. It was just so clean energetically of acknowledging where I was at and my boundary and not hiding yourself. And I'd also love to pop in here too. Maybe this is a good opportunity to share a bit about our friendship. It's really fascinating. For those of you who don't know us, Mandy and I have like an eerily similar childhood in terms of the dynamics, the specific kinds of like traumas that we endured, and just really like the emotional dynamics of the climates that we were raised in. What is fascinating though, and I think really speaks to just the, you know, complexity of this work and how we develop as humans, is Mandy sort of went the direction, like her experience, and please, you know, correct me if this doesn't feel resonant, but my perception from what you've shared is like being the scapegoated one in the family, and also developing more of like an anxious attachment style. And I was the total opposite. I was more in like the golden child role, just totally abandoning all boundaries to conform, and into the avoidant attachment because of that. And so there's been this incredible alchemy and healing experience being friends and practicing to get this work together. And we had no idea, by the way, like when we first connected, we didn't know any of this background or anything. And it's like our friendship is this beautiful fusion of like a meeting point of similarity and then total opposites, but in a really lovely, healing way. And it has been so incredibly eye-opening to navigate these dynamics with someone who is also consciously committed to connection, to resolution, and to being in reality and seeing the truth and finding the growth point. Because, you know, so many people are experiencing the throes of like avoidant attachment and anxious attachment dynamics in relationships, and it's just brutal for both people. And I think we've we've had many events throughout our friendship of like these dynamics still come up. Like this work doesn't exempt you from being human. Like we have triggers, we have these patterns, but the difference is we've really created enough safety to be able to speak them out vulnerably, authentically in the moment, and then transmute them with each other. And it has just, for me, wildly redefined like what is even possible to experience in terms of safety and connection with another human being.
Goosebumps all over.
And I would love to invite you to add anything to that, friend, if there is anything.
Mm. I do, and I feel like I need to grab my charger because I can't see my battery, and it's making me nervous. Let me run and grab my charger real quick to make sure we don't lose
maybe I'll check mine. I think I'm good for now. We planned for technology mishaps, by the way. If anything happens, be it for Wi-Fi reasons or phone death, we have a plan.
Yeah. I'm having so much fun. I'm like, I need to plug my charger in so we're not rushed. Do you have a time boundary on this, by the way, friend?
I am totally good. And we are about an hour and 9 minutes in, just to give you a time check.
And halfway through our content. I'm not surprised. Oh, this is so awesome. And I did want to speak into, do you remember that rupture we had where I felt that pull away?
Yes,
do you mind if I share about that a little bit? Okay. Because I feel like this is so valuable for people to hear. So there was a point in our friendship, you know, Emily and I, we have a Marco Polo going, and now we have Laura in our little Marco Polo. But at the time, it was just Emily and I. And it really opened our world up to what's available because we didn't have to wait to have a call to have presence. We could just go in, share what's coming up, and feel that presence, even though the person isn't physically there on the call. You can still feel their presence and then receive the mirroring and the connection later. Anyway, I had felt a pullback from Emily, and being a sensitive, I can feel these energy dynamics, and it's always been, you know, that's part of what creates the anxious attachment in me is like, oh no, I can feel something. Am I allowed to speak to that? Because the pattern is the avoidant won't own the pull away. And then the energy dynamic just digresses into separation from there. So I had felt this pull away from Emily. And then I was feeling that like urge to suppress and move forward. And I was like, no, we're fine. We don't need to bother Emily with this. And like, as the day and like the next day progressed, it became very clear that like, oh no, I'm going to have to say something. It's like, here's our opportunity to practice like what we're preaching here and what we're doing. And so I came into Polo, I believe, and shared super vulnerably what I was feeling. And I remember you came back and shared, and when I say vulnerably, I mean like shaking the trauma.
We get real.
Crying, and then Emily
we get real on Polo with each other.
And you shared really vulnerably where you were at and why the pull away was happening. And oh, friend, I remember we both felt that need to like control and like come up with a strategy for later. And both of us were like, okay, we don't need to do that. Like, let's just feel through this, see each other in it, see how we feel tomorrow before we start trying to strategize and like figure out how to never have this happen again and whatnot. And I really want to share with people that portion of it and how freaking magical it is, because that's the trust in the divine. And that's the trust in the work. And I'm telling you, we never had to strategize. We literally never had to have a conversation. Both of us were like, gosh, I feel like it's resolved. And like, there's this sense that like, if we meet this again, it's going to be different and we can move through it.
And we have too.
Yes. And and we have met that dynamic again and moved through it again. And each time it creates a deeper safety in our union as friends. And like the anxious part in me, it's like I'm observing the anxiousness from a new place. And there's such a trust built in our friendship and a trust built in Emily because we both have such a commitment to integration and a commitment to the work. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that, friend? Or your experience in it?
I really would just like to add to the fact that it's like, even though we've encountered subsequent layers of this, I will say each time it's like the intensity has just diminished so much. And because there is now so much trust and vulnerability felt, like in the beginning, I feel like some of our first sort of like riffs of this that came up of our ruptures was like, it took us longer to speak to it because there was more fear still of like, oh my gosh, what's going to come up? Can my friend handle this? Will we be able to transmute it? Okay, let me try to work through it on my own. Suppressing it, I don't want to suppress. Like, we're committed to vulnerability. And now I feel like when we hit those layers, it's like instantly felt. We both process individual. I mean, it's just a, that's just like the state that we live in, is moving through this now. So it's like when something comes up,
Yes,
where it's immediately noticed and intentionally addressed and brought to the table. So there's less of that time for like the spiraling and the festering to happen in the meantime, which I feel like,
yes,
you know, the reason I share this is for people watching is because I feel like there's the dynamic itself, and then there's everything that spirals out of the dynamic when you're like waiting and it's building and we start to create stories in our mind about it. And as we've moved through these layers, now it's like we feel it, we acknowledge it, there's not as much intensity, and there's these new nuances. And now I feel, at least for me, even when I feel that resistance come up in my body, there's like that innate reaction of like the push away. There's now a softening because there's the built trust of like, oh, okay, I know this person isn't trying to consume me. This person isn't trying to control me. Like, I get to have my needs. I get to have myself, and I get to be in connection with this person. So there's like the reaction and then an immediate softening and the desire naturally to return to connection and transmute the dynamic.
mm-hmm. Yes. And our friendship has been really challenging for me in the most beautiful way, because I have a history of, when I feel that anxious attachment, controlling. And let me feel into this. How do I want to say it? It's like I can feel that urge, and I can feel the stories that come along with it. Like, I need to manage Emily's process. I need to, you know, do XYZ to make sure she stays with me. You know, sometimes that's like, you know, hiding my anxious parts or whatever. That's all the control mechanism, either controlling myself or controlling Emily. And every time I'm called into surrendering into trust and sharing vulnerably and trusting the energetic movement, magic happens.
Yes.
So it's like, now the urge to control is less and less because I know the magic of not controlling. And it's like every time we transmute something, we're inviting more divine love, unconditional love into each of our bodies individually, and then into the union
Yes,
of our friendship.
absolutely.
When we control, we're blocking that divine love
Yes.
from coming in.
The other piece I want to throw in here too is like from my perception of like receiving you, because I feel like sometimes people get this idea that in like an anxious avoidant attachment, that the thing to do is like, because we're so conditioned to bulldoze. When this work first starts, I see people a lot of the time where it's like the avoidant is expected to lean in and the anxious one is expected to give space, but neither of those things are happening from an aligned place. And so there's still the tension of the dynamic. And the difference when you actually can emotionally move through and release that is you get to diffuse the tension in the dynamic for real. And also, the beauty for me of this is like, I get to receive everything that's happening for you vulnerably without being made responsible for fixing it. That's what I feel is the huge difference in this, is like, you're not hiding from me the level of trigger or what's happening, but you're also not depending on me to fix it. And even the subtler moments too, like we have hit layers of even that with each other. And just the vulnerability of like, wow, this is really activating for me. I can feel that I want you to fix this, or I'm wanting this, and I'm not making you responsible for that either. And just acknowledging those pieces where we parentify each other.
Yes. I remember the other day when I was like, I'm not going to lie, I want you to be my mommy right now. And like, we just laughed through it, and like so much alchemized by just admitting that, laughing through it.
The amount of conversations that we have where it's like just sharing something so uncomfortable and just being in the awkward together. And without trying to solve it. I think you really touched on that piece too, of not trying to just force ourselves to fix this. Like, this isn't approached from the mind space of like, there's anything wrong with Mandy or there's anything wrong with Emily, and we need to like fix this to have a healthy relationship. It's a beautiful, just like permission to exist in what's real is really how I feel about it.
Yeah. Yes. And two humans have to get to a certain level of alchemizing resistance to be able to do that in relationship.
And I will also add in here too, the willingness, when it's appropriate, to process with an outside party. Like, yeah.
This last rupture, that's what I did. I was like, I cannot deliver this from a place of no controlling energy, like being there. So that's how I knew. That comes down to self-trust. I was like, I need to process something before I voice this out to Emily. And that's the first time actually that I've felt that, and it went really well. And shout out to Damon, Damon Karadia. He and I do trades, and he is so magical, and he helped me process through that. So thanks, Damon.
Well, where do we want to go next?
Should we look at our itinerary? Okay, where the heck are we at? Oh, Teal's events. How many Teal's events have you been to? Tell us a bit about your experience. You want to go first? Or
I'll give you the floor on this one if you want, friend, since I went last time.
Okay, yeah. I've been to two. So I've been to CP training. That was August 2019. And then I went to one synchronization workshop, which was December of that same year. And both were freaking magical. I mean, just the opening, the connection I experienced at these events, especially CP training. I mean, we call it emotional boot camp because you were just like, we're doing trades with each other all day, processing and then facilitating, processing, then facilitating. And what I experienced in my body was nothing short of profound. I mean, I re-experienced my birth. This is super vulnerable to share because there's so much fear of judgment around that, like you would. But I shit you not, I went through a process of being in my mother's womb. And then right after that, and healing that, and right after that, they were like, you're going to be facilitated again. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, I don't know what you're going to find in there. I feel amazing. Like, good luck. And she started sitting with me, and my body started going into contractions. And it was like absolutely mind-blowing. I went into full body tension and then release, tension, then release. And it was like, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And then there was like the voice of like, am I making this happening? Is this fake? Is this real? And then I just kept surrendering into it and like trusting what my intuition was showing me. And there was a point in the session where, and I have no intention for sharing this right now, by the way, it just wants to come through. So I'm just going to trust that. There was a point in the session where I was like, okay, let's invite my adult self in. My child self obviously needs help. And we invited my adult self in, and it was like this instant knowing that that wasn't right. And I was like, wait a minute. No, I'm not supposed to help her. I but I felt the intuitive nudge to feel through the entire experience. And then I experienced like the white light of the hospital lights, and I was a C-section. So the umbilical cord was wrapped around my throat, and it was an emergency. So my mom had contractions, but then they like ripped me out. And it was, I mean, birth is traumatic for everyone, but this was like really, really traumatic because it was a C-section. I'm like ripped from the mother, right? And you better believe that this stuff affects us somatically and affects how we experience our present day life. So I had this really beautiful moment with Teal because I asked her, you know, we're in group, we're talking about like how the day went, what we processed through. And I asked Teal, I was like, I re-experienced my birth today. And she got so excited. And I was like, but I have a question. I'm wondering like why I intuitively wanted to feel through that. Like I'm having a hard time understanding why that was the right choice. And she said something to me that sent ripples through my body. And what she said was, you wanted to know you had the choice. So through experiencing that from a place of choice, now there isn't disempowerment around it. So the body is coming into a deeper state of empowerment. And I have goosebumps right now sharing that. It was so powerful. And Angela, who facilitated for me, she was also a body worker. And we had time before lunch. She took me out to the grass. She laid me on the ground and she did all this intuitive body work on me. I had never experienced that level of nurturing in my life. It was so amazing. Like there are no words. And I just really laid back and allowed myself to receive. And she had such a big heart. You know, when you can feel someone just pouring into you and then they can feel you receiving it, and that just makes them go harder. It was one of those moments, and it was, I'll just never forget it.
So beautiful, friend.
Profound connection. Yeah. And yeah, so my experience at Teal's events has been nothing short of epic connection, epic healing, epic levels of safety with other humans and with myself. Oh, one more experience I want to share. So I have trauma around spilling. I don't think I've ever told you this, friend. I spilled a lot when I was a kid, and then I got like highly shamed for it, which created more spilling because now you have an anxious child that's like holding their cup and they're like, and so, oh, friend, you're frozen.
Let's see.
Oh no. So I'm like now an anxious child, like not able to hold my cup right and then spilling more. This is how spilling becomes a manifestation, right? And I spilled at CP training. We were all sitting around in the living room and I just like hit my coffee, full coffee cups. It just went everywhere. And I just was like, of course I would spill. Like, of course that would happen. And I just experienced, it was such a healing experience because everyone like saw me in that and they saw my inner child in that and they like jumped up to help and like I got a hug and they're like, it's safe to spill here. So yeah, I just wanted to share that experience too. And now I don't spill as much.
Spilling trauma resolved, people.
Oh, except the other day. Yes, spilling trauma. Except the other day, it was so funny. Harper had a drink. I made us a smoothie and she had half and I had half. And I was a little nervous about her spilling. So I was like, let's hold it with two hands, you know. And I ended up spilling my smoothie all over the ground. And I was like, boy, am I glad that I didn't go into like trauma response controlling you, how dumb would I have felt if I was like, don't spill, hold it like this, and then I spill mine. So I had a little chuckle with myself around that one. And I was totally regulated and cleaned it up. And, you know, before I would have been shaming myself and just doing that unconsciously and then being dysregulated and having no idea why. So
this is so powerful. I just want to reflect here for your side of things, friend, particularly, because when we experience these childhood traumas, right? And like, this is what I mean, that idea of like widening the lens of trauma into like spilling a cup. When you get shamed for it, you know, when you're 2 years old or 4 years old, that's a massively impactful experience for a child in that level of perception. And what I think your line of work really, really touches on, working with parents, is how when we still have those operating in us, then they come out at our kids, because us trying to control our own inner child and manage that experience and emotional response subconsciously then comes out as like externally trying to control with our kids. And even in the time period that I've been friends with you, like, you know, in the beginning, already far beyond, you know, the conventional world of parenting. But like, Mandy lives and breathes this work. Like, I can, if you want to sign up with a practitioner, I just have to say, like, as your friend, having experienced the potency of your work, like, I cannot help but sing your praises any chance possible. And being your friend, I've gotten to witness real time when you've had triggers. And Mandy is that person who, when she has a trigger, it's immediately like, okay, I got this. I see it. Where can I go process? Where can I take this? How do I contain this in safe space so it's not coming out at my child, on my child? How do I transmute it in myself? And then how can I give it to my clients? And just seeing the evolution of your relationship with Harper grow more and more connected, more and more beautiful, and being able to witness Harper. Like, I nannied for Mandy for a while. And so like, I've gotten to interact with Harper one-on-one as well, outside of, yes,
I got it short.
outside of the context of Mandy, without her influence in the room, and just hearing how this, yes, hearing how this child relates at 4 years old, capable of telling you what she's feeling, what are her personal boundaries, whether it's like with what we're playing or being available for a hug or not available for a hug, and just being able to witness real time a child growing up in a safe environment and already having that as like the basis of template is just, I have chills. Like, it's amazing.
Thank you, friend. I'm so receiving that.
My pleasure, woman.
So, would you like to tell us about your experience?
I will. Just to dovetail immediately. Well, I'll start here, actually. I'll say the first event that I ever went to was my completion process training. And that was in April of 2018. I think Mandy and I actually had like back-to-back trainings. We just missed each other. And the second one was a curveball retreat, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, completion process training was like you're being trained to facilitate, like Mandy's describing. It's kind of just round the clock processing and working with this, layered in with Q&A and whatnot. And curveball is much more of like personal work. You're not facilitating anything. The event, in my experience, was just like it felt like space to really just unfold, drop in, bring everything to the table. Every curveball is different. It is dedicated specifically to the people that come and to what is alive and real in the room in the moment. So it's very, very tailored personally for the individuals that come. And then a handful of synchronization workshops and whatnot. And with all of them, the thing that I really want to parallel that Mandy shared and hit me so profoundly when I first experienced this work and this community is just the level of love and connection that I felt with other people. There was this sense of like, this must be what family feels like. Because this may sound strange to some people, but in my experience, I had such an emotionally disconnected household and environment that it was like physically existing with other people, but it's like in a room with people, but completely alone kind of experience. And I think it was the first time I had been in a group of people that was really showing up with their whole heart, their authenticity, and yeah, just the energy in my experience is palpable in the room. And for me, at least, there was this sense of it's safe to share anything and everything. It was like, there's nothing off the table. There is none of me that is too much or too scary or too this or not enough that. It was like permission to fully be exactly who I was and what I was experiencing. And just the massive amount of support and mirroring and validation to do that. And I also just have to give a shout out to the like cooking crews and whatnot that come to these events. So the people that cook for either the trainees at the completion process events or participants at other ones are also typically people who are in this work in some capacity. So it's not just like random strangers that are coming to cater. So even down to the people that are cooking your meals, it was like the chefs are in there intentionally like pouring love and good intentions to your dinner. And yeah, it's just, it's so felt in everything. And
the energy of it is potent.
It really is. And
yes,
for me, again, it was just the sense of like, oh my God, this is possible. It was like, there was the sense of there's a whole new world and reality of life that I was not aware of in a really, really good way. And actually, the thing that really stands out for me to share from my completion process training was having like, how do I want to word this? A positive integration. This isn't the best way to say it. Maybe it'll come together as I talk, but I feel like a lot of people may perceive this work as like, you know, because it's trauma integration, like we're processing pain and it's just like always sobbing and tears. And not to say that there isn't a ton of that processed, and I've processed a ton of it, but there are also these times where when you go through and you feel, what gets integrated is a sense of joy. Because when we cut off emotionally from aspects of ourselves, we also cut off our capacity for like the beautiful side of the spectrum. So one of the first integrations that I had was, I don't remember the specific memory anymore, but I also had an experience that was just like palpable shaking, full body rocking. Like, it was it's probably the most intense physical process that I've ever had in this work. And when the integration landed, it was like, it felt like I integrated innocence and like the joy of like when you're a kid and there's no responsibility, there's like nothing has been tainted yet, and you are just in full-blown expression of joy. And this is why I say we get positive aspects suppressed as well, because so many of us have been shamed for our joy, shamed for our creativity, shamed for our expression, because as children, like, we're just in it. There's nothing held back. And if you have a parent that, you know, even like may look at you a certain way, or you can feel, you know, they're in their own world and maybe it's too loud or not a convenient time or whatever it is, we learn to make that joy smaller. And it was like I freed that for the first time. And the woman who facilitated for me, I'll protect her name, I don't know if she'll want to share or not, also had sort of a similar experience. And at the end of it, we were literally just like running around, giggling like children in this full body experience of joy together. And it was just a palpable rewiring of my entire system and being for happiness. It was like a whole nother part of myself opened up. And
yes, friend.
The other
I can feel it as you talk.
Yes,
about
it's like it was so bubbly, so bubbly. And I will also say it gave me a reference for being able to tap into that. Like, that was not even on the emotional radar at the time until I had that process. Yes. And so like getting that reference point and being able to go there, magic. And then the other thing I will say is just my personal experience of teal at these events, at these workshops. Also at my completion process training. I remember at one point our official like training day, or like that segment of training, had come to a close. And Teal was walking out, and I can't remember what the question was, but I asked her, like, could I ask her a quick question? And she stopped and she said, yes. And I hadn't asked yet. And there was just this sense, it was honestly really confronting at the time, because I'd never had a human being be that present with me. It was like I could feel every cell of her body and being was in that moment with me. And she just looked into my eyes, and I think it was maybe a couple seconds at most, but it was like something just rippled through my whole system, feeling that level of presence. And at the time, there was actually, I had a little bit of a pull away. It was sort of that avoidant reaction of like, oh my God, this person is like really here, more so than I've ever experienced before.
I feel your shock there too, friend.
And yet at the same time, it was like there was a differentiation between like real time, what I could feel from her, and my own patterns being activated. So it was like I could feel the avoidant activation, and at the same time, I could feel just a profound love and presence from this human. And that has just really, really stuck with me. And watching her interact with other participants, and during my curveball, when I had my family display done afterwards and everything was kind of settling, I was really in just like a reality collapse moment. It was one of those times where it was just like, it feels like your whole world is disintegrating in a way. And it's like amazing in the sense that you're coming to truth and yet incredibly painful. And she took the time to just really have a one-on-one conversation, to ask potent questions, to give reflection. And I guess what I'm meaning to say is I got to experience it, and I also witnessed just the level of devotion to making sure that every single person felt resolved, felt complete before the day was closed or the training was closed. And at one of my trainings, and again, I don't want to go into details just because I don't have permission from all of the people involved, but there was actually a rupture between someone and Teal, and she just immediately responded so beautifully and took time out to address this separately with this person, to create safe space, and then afterwards to come back and do that as well with the group. So it was really like I just witnessed real time the commitment to resolution and this sense of like no man left behind. Like just the standard of excellence and care for people at these events I have not witnessed anywhere else. And just like the beauty and the gratitude for that, and particularly in such vulnerable work, because I've, being a seeker and in sort of like the spiritual world and different modalities and whatnot, like I've definitely been to some events where the person facilitating will take you really deep, but then doesn't actually really have you when stuff comes up. And I feel like that's the main distinguisher at Teal's events in my experience, is you really are held in that container.
Beautifully said, friend.
Thank you.
I love this. I'm really glad you spoke into this moment where Teal made eye contact with you, because I was hoping you'd speak into that. I forgot to tell you that last night. I remember when you first told me that, and like the way you describe it, like whoever's listening can just feel that experience. It's just so
it was powerful.
profound.
It was incredibly powerful. And that moment really, really stuck with me. And actually, when I came back from that training, this was when I had moved into that new living situation with the new roommates. There was just this sense of like, this is the level of safety I want to create with every single person I interact with. Like, if you are in my world in any kind of proximity, this is the standard. We're going to be real. We're going to be present. We're going to deal with what's actually alive in the human and in the room in front of us. And it led to beautiful things, by the way.
Yes.
I got to witness, like, and I will say it was incredibly difficult to do that at this time, because I moved in with these people. I knew none of them whatsoever. Everyone in the house was a total stranger to me. And I, at that time, was struggling hard dealing with trauma still. And it was actually at that point in my life, I had dealt with self-harm through my like young teen years, dealing with trauma and whatnot. And then it was sort of like resurfacing at that point in my life. And I could feel it was like the more I suppressed it, the more of a beast it became. And I was terrified at the time because these were new roommates, but there was just this sense of like, I need to be able to be with people that I can be honest with, where when they ask me, how are you? Or how's your day? That I can give them a real answer. And at that time, that reality was not pretty. So just the what I was being called into, if I wanted to be actually vulnerable and real, felt terrifying. And I took the leap and I was just like radically honest. And it was received so beautifully with so much love. And then it actually led to like this incredible household, because when I shared, it then became the permission piece of my other roommates started opening up like, wow, I'm actually moving through this thing, or I'm struggling in this area of my life. What do you think of this? And it was like, that was the point for me, that it felt like we went from being just roommates to having real connection. It was like we became a little family in that household. And that is the magic of when you can have real relationships.
Friend. When I think about the ripple effect, it just gives me goosebumps all over. This imprinting Teal gave you just like rippled out into your whole world.
Yes.
Wow. And you got to be the embodied invitation.
They did. They really did. That's something.
I'm so glad I had that experience.
And I will say that just for anyone watching too, is people will surprise you in incredibly beautiful ways, in my experience. I think
yes,
in our world, there are so many people that are dying for the real invitation to be honest. And we're so accustomed. We're so accustomed and used to suppressing that when we meet another person who can do that, even if it's, you know, not a pretty thing, there's like this sigh of relief that happens of like, oh, okay, we can be real with each other.
Yes. And sometimes people run for the hills. Like, I don't want to lie to you guys.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
I've experienced both. Yep. Shall we see what's next on the agenda?
Let's return to our notes.
Well, we kind of spoke into this already, but we'll see if there's anything we want to add. How has the completion process personally changed your life?
I'm just going to check my battery real quick, too. I might switch here. I think I'm going to plug this and put in a different pair of headphones. That way it is you guys.
Okay.
We might get a weird angle here. That's okay.
You're beautiful in all your angles and all your forms.
Me. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Mm-hmm. Yay.
What?
So yeah, how has the completion process personally changed your life? Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I will say the one piece that I feel I haven't touched on is just the beauty of the network of the practitioners themselves. And, you know, this is more specific to like if you are interested in, you know, pursuing this training in the capacity of being able to facilitate. But nonetheless, I feel like I just have to say it. Just the amount of support that I have found, and the openness of this community, and being able to, as a practitioner, talk with other practitioners and co-create, get help when it's needed, bounce ideas off, and also to have other people to refer clients to. Because the truth is, like, not every client that comes
Yes.
through my door is necessarily the best match for my work. And I'm okay with that. And having this network has, like, we are so effing resourced that it's like, when I come across a client that I don't feel like I am the best match to serve for whatever reason, there's like always an immediate, this person would be perfect that I can send them to. So,
Yes.
yes.
I've experienced that as well. Yeah. And also just being able to go ask the community, like, okay, I did this session. This is how I kind of worked through this, but I have a question about this, you know, and getting those outside reflections of how to help specific clients with specific issues when it does feel aligned, but you just need that extra kind of external
Yes,
reflection.
absolutely.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I think other than that, it feels really complete. I will say one more thing, actually. I mean, the biggest change, I think, is it's our friendship. Like, had I not had this work, and I will say, even when we first became friends, the level of friendship that we have now, I could never have even imagined then. It was like that version of me could not even conceive of this and what was to come.
Yep.
So, more so than anything, just the capacity to truly create safe relationship and safety in my own body and being to be able to show up with that as well.
Yes. Beautifully said, friend. I want to add something to that too. I've had these beautiful experiences, you know, since sharing this work on social media and since stepping into my own embodiment as a safe person. I've had people from my past reach out and like seek resolution from certain events. And it has been incredibly beautiful to be able to share my experience from a place of not projecting now, when in the past I was, and fully be with and hear the other person's experience of me without being triggered into shame and just reflecting and mirroring and validating. Wow, of course you felt that. Like when you felt that, I was feeling this. So that makes so much sense. And to be able to create understanding and resolution with people that we've hurt is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I'm so grateful. And with that, I want to make an invitation. Anyone who's watching this and feels like you want to connect and share anything from the past you need to be seen in, felt through with, I am freaking here for
friend. Yes.
And I love you.
Beautiful, friend.
Because I was in super narcissistic and codependent patterns. I was not nice to people sometimes. And I was triggered as F. Like, I will own it.
I'm proud of you, friend.
So,
I know.
Thank you, friend.
The depth of commitment you have to creating real repair with people.
Thank you. And I know what it's like to reel over events. So to be able to give someone the gift of actual relational healing is just giving myself that gift, right? Like we're all one. So
the other thing that's coming to my mind too, friend, that I think might be worth sharing is this work has really, like, processing through my own stuff has now given me the capacity to include or exclude people from my life in an aligned way. Because I think, probably a lot of people watching this are coming to this work are coming because we have trauma. And, probably have, and truly, the basis of relationships on this planet right now, like, are dysfunction, even if it's not on what we would consider to be like the severe end of the spectrum, but I'll just speak
Yep.
for myself on this, of like, my relationships with my family before this work were just fucking torturous, to be quite honest. And some of them have grown with me in certain ways, some of them have not at all. But the difference now is, before, I feel like, and I went through years where I basically separated from my family completely, and there was little to no connection at all. And it was needed. I don't regret that. But I also can see now that it was from a very, like, it was a survival move. And now the difference is, returning to these relationships, I feel like, where the patterns haven't changed, there's no longer a trigger in the sense, like, I'm not subjecting myself to that. I feel like, one, I'm able to be in reality and see the truth of what certain people in my life have the capacity to offer and not. And I've aligned my expectations, if I'm going to keep people in my life, with, like, I know there are certain people in my family that I'm not going to call if I need emotional support. They're not capable of offering that. And now it gets to be a conscious choice of, like, is it aligned to keep this person in a certain way, or is it aligned to release them? And if I keep them, I get to have a relationship with them that is harmonious and realistic. Whereas before, with certain family relationships and friendships, it was just kind of like square piece, round hole, constantly, of need. And it's allowed me to really come into reality and own up front what I need in a relationship to feel safe, to state that, and to come to that from the very beginning. And then we get to decide from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautifully
So
said,
it's made
friend.
both returning to old relationships and starting new ones infinitely easier.
Yes. I've had a bit of a different experience with my family, as you know. I think I'll just speak into it a little bit. With needing to set boundaries in the best interest of my own inner children and also my child, with a lot of people, those boundaries have not been received, and have, I've been highly scapegoated. And I'll just share, my parents have, before this documentary even came out, decided that I'm in a cult, and completely dismissed every boundary, every feeling that I have shared. Which doesn't surprise me, because that's been the pattern my whole childhood, and it's been extremely painful, and there's been a ton of layers to work through. And I watched it. It was extremely triggering. To think that my parents now have more evidence for their stance, because this documentary definitely paints Thiel to be leading a cult. And anyone who watches it would believe that.
Yes.
Unless you've experienced her work and you've experienced, my truth is that this work has led me to transmuting my own control dynamics. not taken me into a group where I'm being controlled. And maybe that's a good segue, friend, into the last question, which is, how did you feel watching The Deep End, and what do you want people to know? How do you feel about me segueing and answering that and then giving you the floor?
Exactly what I was feeling.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the first episode, I was like, could be better. Wasn't that great. I had hope, though, after watching the first episode that, it would be more neutral, and then it just digressed from there. And I really want to speak into episode 3 and how epically traumatizing it was to even watch that scene where they make it look like Teal and her team are waterboarding people at her events. I mean, there's a part of me that just wants to literally laugh at that because it's a joke. I mean, and then there was a part of me that literally had to pause, because when you heal your own trauma, you become more sensitive. And it was physically painful to watch that scene. I literally was saying, no, 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 as I was watching it. And I'm like, so hopefully people can feel into my body, and that if I can't tolerate watching that on a screen, I wouldn't be tolerating it at an event. I would run for the effing hills. I'd be like, this is not fucking okay. And I'm out of here. Yeah. And I'll just say that the way my body, my emotional guidance system, experienced that documentary is completely polar opposite from how my body experienced her events and experienced her as a person. And yeah, it just makes me super sad to think about what it must be like to be her and her team and be trying to help people and watching that on a screen. And then now in a position to want to speak the truth, but not want to be defending yourself because that looks bad. I mean, I can't imagine the level of second guessing how you're speaking everything and trying to repair the image that's been created. And I just want to say that I think Teal has done a beautiful job. It feels like she has truly embodied her inner advocate. And when she speaks about this documentary, I don't feel defensiveness. I feel truth. I feel anger. Of course, there's anger there at having her boundaries completely violated, and it feels really contained in the way she shares it. It feels really loving. And yeah, it just feels like when she embodies this inner advocate, it feels like she's advocating for all of our inner children. And even the inner children of the people that have hurt her. So it's the truth of how I feel about all of it. And if I was truly through this, I'd be a blubbering mess right now, but I'll feel through that fully.
Did you lose me later? Oh man.
I'll share the version of tears that's socially acceptable.
Conscious suppression. Hopefully that won't cut out fully.
It seems like you're back, friend. So I want to give you the floor to answer that question too. If you want to add anything about how it was for you.
Yes. echoing everything that you've said. And I guess what I really want to speak to is just the growing level of dread as the series progressed, and the sense of just like how surreal it was to watch this documentary from the standpoint of someone who has actually experienced these events. And, you know, I don't want to go too into depth into like picking apart details and whatnot. And, you know, anyone who's watching can, you know, watch what Teal and the team and other practitioners have spoken to about these events and the truth of their experiences and whatnot. And oh, hopefully I didn't lose you, friend. Okay, perfect.
No, we didn't.
And I will just say for me as well, what I witnessed in that documentary was really, really frightening, quite honestly, in just how well done the documentary itself was in terms of a piece of art and how you can make something look and how not accurate it was to my experience of the reality of being at these events. And yeah, particularly that scene where they make it look like someone is being waterboarded, which, by the way, for anyone interested, I believe it was Graciela who put out a video of what the actual practice looks like. So you
yes, and I'll commit to finding that and putting that in the
comments. You can go and see what that actually looks like. In a not chopped up on a TV series. And yeah, it was just, there was shock, rage, grief, fear. Quite honestly, as a certified practitioner, there was definitely a level of just like incredible grief witnessing people that I know personally in this documentary, seeing their words twisted, their experiences twisted, was just, it made me sick. And I also felt really worried just as a practitioner, seeing the light in which this work was portrayed. It was like, this is the opposite of everything that I know that I stand for. And from what I have seen in the work and other practitioners and Teal and all of it was just so incredibly polar opposite of my experience with all of this. And just for me personally, the layer that also really came up with, because, you know, specifically this piece around painting Teal as a cult leader, having come from a cult background, finding this work, using this work to untangle the layers of trauma that I experienced from that and set myself free. And, you know, going on now to be able to lead a life that isn't bound by that trauma was just, I cannot describe the level of grief and disgust and just like that feeling of being gaslit and just like having things warped, to see people portray what has been like, you know, the main modality that has helped me set myself free from that paradigm, to then be portrayed as it was the thing for me that was just like, no, like just horror
absolutely
in my body. And then
I can feel the disbelief and the shock and
Yes.
the
And then
disorientation.
also, you know, I will say for me, there are still some layers of this. I no longer feel like it controls my life, defines my life, and there are still emotions that come up relative, you know, to those experiences. And I lost my train of thought there. That was deep. Give it a minute, it'll come back. It might not come back. Where was I going, friend?
Well, the pressure of Alive, that'll do it, right? Yeah, you were talking about the layers of shock and disbelief at, you know, this being portrayed as a cult when it has helped you untangle and set yourself free from those experiences, and how you're still untangling
Yes.
some of those layers.
There was something I wanted to say about that, and it just like got away from me in like the rawness of the emotion in my body with this.
Yeah.
Well, I won't keep us here, and if it comes back, I'll say it. But yeah, just the main point being that it's just heartbreaking, to witness. Oh, I know where I was going with this. The layers of, I think the piece for me is the layers that are still present now are the fear of like owning that experience. And you know, I very much had that experience. I will say, to share just a little bit here, as a child in that cult, my perception was not that I was in a cult. And I have had the experience personally as a kid, telling people about what I'm in and what I'm doing, and having them look at you and say you're in a cult, and like just the level of reaction that gets from people. And so now, to have this modality of work that I love, that has helped heal me, helped set me free, to be associated with that has just felt like a re-traumatization of that process of like,
it is.
Oh my God, this is happening again. Except I'm not in a cult. And it's like just the biggest gaslight that anyone has ever given me.
Yes.
And
we both processed through layers of confusion and like been really vulnerable with each other. Like I'm questioning myself, am I in a cult? And we have sat with that and felt through that. And every time we come back to our own truth, which is that this modality is bringing us home to our bodies and to our soul and to sovereignty, which is the opposite of a cult.
And the evidence of life, for me, I feel like that was the thing. Like with these layers of my personal trauma, I will say I've processed very vulnerable with Mandy these moments of like, oh my God, am I really not like seeing something? It's like I had to go back and process that level of self-questioning because for me, that was such a deep wound from that experience. Like what really impacted me on the other side was this sense of I can't trust myself. So to then have to reprocess that, and you know, Mandy and I have both sat down and we really have like processed in depth over, you know, multiple calls and days, and contemplating this and what do we want to say and how do we want to share it, and really wanting to speak to this like not from a place of defense, because I'll say for me very vulnerably, there was definitely a moment at first, like when that documentary ended, that I definitely was triggered into defense of like, oh my God, now I have to like prove that my work is not a cult. So after processing, and I will say I don't feel that anymore. at this point, I do feel really
Same.
neutral, and like this work speaks for itself. And in my life, the evidence is that my relationships have gotten better, and not just relationships with people. I will say relationship with my body, relationship with money, like, because everything in life we have a relationship with. And whatever your patterns are, they come out everywhere. My relationship with food. So to
Yes.
just see the improvement in all of those areas is like, this is what has given me back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And those anchor points are so needed. I have this, Harper's
yeah.
always my anchor point. This has no doubt. I have to sneeze. Come on. And it's gone. You know, every time, you know, I was raised to self-question. You know, I always say there's a fine line between self-reflection and self-gaslighting and self-questioning. And, you know, I still have layers of that coming up. And this documentary definitely brought a bit of that up. I will say I didn't spiral the way I have done in the past with certain things, which really showed me my growth. But yeah, so it's like I was raised to question myself and my own sanity and my body and my emotions on an epic level. And this process has brought me out of those patterns.
Absolutely. And as your friend, I just want to reflect too, because, you know, I've had the window into your personal journey, and the beginning to now getting to see the internal gaslighting that happens as a result of being raised with that. And the difference of when I would see you go into spirals versus now being able to just drop into your truth. It's like that pattern has alchemized in such an incredible way.
Yes, it's like the gap has gotten smaller and smaller. Yeah. Thank you for that reflection, friend.
How would it feel to you, friend, to transition into what we'd like people to know? Like, all of this, you know, said and having happened now, it's kind of like, all right, this is where we are. What now?
I love that. Do you want to go first?
Go first? Yeah. And I wrote myself a couple little notes here. And they're pretty quick and simple, actually, and I really sat with this. The most potent pieces for me are really, one, like, find your own truth, find your own sovereignty, no matter where you're at, who you're affiliated with, whatever group. I mean, for me, you know, and having been in those circles, I really encourage the questioning of it. I think there's a healthy degree of questioning for everything. So really, I would encourage anyone who's encountering this, especially if you're encountering it new to this world, to really view all sides and allow yourself to experience some of this in your own body, in your own system, and allow that to be your compass in this, rather than just listening to all of the noise. And I know there are so many viewpoints out there on this right now. Two, the importance of actual somatic work beyond just mental processing. And that is really my love for this work and this process, is that it gets to the nervous system level. What else? I think I covered the healing is inherently dysregulating earlier, so I'm not going to retouch on that one. And the last one I will say is, if you are someone starting out in this work, it gets better. But I just really want to reiterate, like, the me who began this work could not have even conceived of how much better life could feel, how much better relationships could feel. So, yes.
I want to second that, friend, because the process of healing, as we both know, can be messy. And there's points where you do go, you know, what's the point of all this? You know, and I just want to reiterate that safe relationships are possible. And if you keep doing the work, it cannot not show up in your reality. Yeah. And you can heal anything. Absolutely anything.
Yeah, and I think we both remind each other of this often, and it's that did you lose me?
You froze up a little bit, friend. Say that sentence one more time.
The magic of this work is in the feeling itself, because the mind so wants to figure out how to fix and how to control. And oftentimes, every time, the piece where it actually shifts is when you feel it without that agenda, when you give yourself the space to just be with what's alive.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes that takes sitting with layers of dissociation and sitting with, I don't want to feel this. And yeah. So beautifully said, friend. Well, this has felt really potent to me and really healing for me in my throat chakra. Thank you, thank you, thank you for this space. Thank you, everyone who showed up, who watches the replay. I honor each and every one of you and your journey, every version of you along the way.
Yes.
And we did want to share contact info at the end, friend. So I'll start with that. Once again, my name is Mandy J. I'm a conscious parenting expert and emotional alchemist, completion process practitioner. And I also love working with sensitives. So you do not have to be a parent to work with me. If you resonate with me at all, please reach out. You can message me on Facebook, and you can also email me at mandyjay222@gmail.com. But Facebook is really the best
Beautiful
way.
Friend.
Yes,
Facebook is great. You can find me here, shoot me a message. I do check that pretty much every day. So that is a phenomenal way to get in contact with me. You can also submit a contact form on my website, livingwellness.me. Instagram @livingwellness_Emily Simpson. And I'll drop a graphic in the comments once this closes for people to look at. And yeah, again, I really help people heal from a body-led place to cultivate a life that supports wellness and feels good from the body itself. So yeah, I just also want to pop in a quick thank you here to everyone who watched as well and will watch, and Mandy for doing this with me. I definitely, it's been really lovely to share this space with you. And also thank you to Teal. Thank you to the incredible team for this work, this community, just everything that has come from it. It distinctly changed my life in unimaginable ways. And I am just more and more grateful every single day for what comes out of this.
Mm-hmm. I want to add to a gratitude to Teal. I don't want to project, and feeling into what it must be like to come from her background and come into a space of empowerment and sharing what she's sharing after what she's been through. Teal, I am so fucking grateful that you made that choice and that you healed to a place where you created enough safety in your own body that you could do that, because it is fucking changing this planet, and it has completely changed how I experience life. And my life is so rich and so connected and so meaningful because you opened your mouth.
Yes. And continue to. Even walking with this.
Yep. Yes. Even walking with this.
Beautifully said, friend.
Powerful. Thanking our divine support today. This felt so good. I could feel myself getting safer and safer, feeling safer and safer to express as we kept going, friend. And, you know, as you know, I have a lot of trauma around speaking my truth and public speaking as well. And so this has been incredibly healing for me. And I just want to thank everybody that has watched and received both of our truth today, and in helping create that safety for us to share. Because, you know, as practitioners, we sometimes look like we have it all together, but we have inner children too, and they're scared sometimes.
Yes.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. Anything else you want to add, friend, before we sign off?
That feels complete to me.
Okay.
Right.
Sending love to each of you. Thank you for watching. And we'll talk later.